Good morning, everyone, and welcome to, it seems like the summer went fast, but one of our first kickoff lectures here with our senior community center and with the Joslin, with Mizell, with Cathedral City, Indio, but wherever you're from and however you accessed us, welcome. I'm excited as always, and this is a perfect topic for this week for me, especially under stress, is working with Karen Stewart, who I have the pleasure of calling a colleague and also a friend um, that I just wish lived local, because we'd be having coffee every week talking about stress management and all these fun things that we share. So, with that in mind, this is being recorded, as you know, and then it will be on our Eisenhower website as well as our YouTube channel within the week, or week and a half, probably at the most. If you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat feature, and then we'll make sure those are answered. And then if you, we'll open up for live Q&A at the end as well. So it'll be fun. So with that, I'm going to mute myself because there's a lot of noise here, and I will turn you over to Karen. Karen, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brett. It's always a pleasure for me to be asked to participate in these community discussions. I lived over 30 years in the desert and relocated after I retired. So it's the desert always has special meaning for me, and I appreciate this opportunity. The topic for today, as Brett said, is on stress management. This is the agenda that I set up. We'll go through it. I prefer to be very casual with these forums. I like to think of them more as discussions than lectures. So please feel free to ask a question, and Brett will manage that, or if not, we can talk about anything you'd like to talk about at the end. So by way of introduction, I am Karen Stewart. I'm a registered nurse, have been for a very long time, and have been fortunate in my nursing career to have worked across the care continuum from post-op heart surgery to hospice care. So when I retired from Eisenhower a little over 2 years ago, I was the director of the Ranker Wellness Center, which includes cardiac and pulmonary rehab, heart failure. And prior to that, for over a decade, I had been the director of nursing education professional development. These types of community lectures are something I very much enjoy. I enjoy being able to share not only what the literature says in terms of evidence, but also a little bit of my own personal experience, because over the course of my life, I've definitely needed to learn how to better manage stress. And I hope to be able to share some of that with you, and then we'll look forward to learning from you, because that's what community is about, as we learn and share from and with one another. It's always my request that if anyone on the call has something that you want to be sure we talk about, that would be also known as the wish list, then please raise your hand so Brett can add that and let me know, and we'll be sure to include that. I'd like for this to be time that you feel is well spent. So we can do that now if you have a wish list of something, if you'd let Brett know. Otherwise, we'll move forward. Oh, I see. Brett, can you see the chat? I see something, a message.
Yeah, so the message is for me, just saying what you just said.
Oh.
So you can either click on it and ignore it, don't worry about it. And if you see the chat, I'll handle it.
Okay, thanks. All right, so the topics that we will include, just in terms of the agenda, are what are the pillars of well-being. Stress management is a core foundation for our optimizing our well-being in our lives. What is stress? The role of perception. I included this time, I haven't included it before, but there's been so many, this has been quite the summer. And so I included a little bit about environmental change. As it turns out, that's a big topic that's trending in the research. So I thought that would be interesting just to bring to your attention and maybe have some discussion about. We'll talk about the pathophysiology of stress. That's real. Our bodies actually change when we are stressed. So we'll talk about that. And I like to think of stress management in terms of responding versus reacting. And so we'll spend some time talking about what's the difference and why does it matter, and then pick up some tools to use, hopefully that will help you as you walk further on your journey of this life that we all have. So the pillars of well-being, I think these are pretty universal, but today we'll talk about one of those core components, which is stress management. Others are nutrition, regular exercise, and restful sleep. And actually managing our stress helps with all those. Some of those are tools that can help us manage stress, but managing our stress will have a lot to do, particularly with our nutrition and how we sleep. I mentioned that we talk about the impact of disasters and trauma. And that became even more to the foreground, I guess, over the weekend. When I made this slide, it was to talk about the disaster that hit the desert with tropical storm. And I watched and couldn't believe my eyes on the news to see Cathedral City and Palm Springs, and then in talking to friends, the impact that that has and continues to have. As I understand, a significant portion of the infrastructure, particularly in the Cathedral City area, was hugely impacted. So there is a lot of research that is ongoing in this field, not only specifically for a tropical storm, and I live on the Gulf Coast, so I think of tropical storms in my part of the world, not in the desert that I recently left. But it was also from chatting with friends, the summer was a really tough summer in the desert. A lot of bad air quality days and a lot of wind, a lot of sand, a lot of heat. And it's then I think, well, why wouldn't that be so? The globe is changing, and the Coachella Valley, I tend to think of as this small, little, wonderful valley, but why wouldn't it be impacted? So I know how the weather has changed in the 30 plus years that I lived there. But that is now accelerating. So I thought, yeah, well, that makes sense. And so learning to manage our stress will also help us with tools to use as we navigate this really quite ever-changing world. In addition to the tropical storm and the disaster of that, they're also related to the air quality from fires, from the wildfires. And I think the ones that we heard the most about were the wildfires in Canada. And stunning to think that the smoke could impact across, particularly the East Coast of the United States. But I know the desert also had air quality alert days. And so that has impact not only on it just being stressful because we can't do things maybe that we had hoped to do, or it's uncomfortable when we do them, but it contributes to respiratory illness, cardiovascular events, and over long term can even contribute to inflammation in our brains and our neurological system. So something to bear in mind. And I think for those of you that enjoy following the research, I think we'll be learning more, just as we continue to learn as we came out of the pandemic with COVID. COVID is lingering for many people who have long COVID and the impact that that has. So a lot of change. And then just the tragedy of this past weekend in the Middle East, particularly for Israel and the Israelis, Americans, Europeans, people from all over who were targeted in this horrific terrorist attack that has now become a war. We've, for almost 2 years, followed the trauma of Ukraine and the war crimes that have been committed there. That's stressful. I think whether you know someone there or just hear about it. And it's my concern that some of you may actually have friends, family that have been affected by the tragedy in Israel. And hopefully some of what we'll talk about today in terms of tools for stress management, I hope that some of that may prove to be helpful. Any comments anybody have that they'd like to make on disasters and stress before we move on?
If so, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or put it in the chat. But right now, nothing.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Brett. All right. So if any of you have attended one of these forums before, you will recognize the Sultana. She came out of a magazine article 30-something years ago, but she demonstrates very visually the effect of stress. So what is it? We throw the term around a lot. There are countless definitions of stress, but the one that I use the most is was done by Dr. White, who was did occupational psychology, and it's the perceived demand for change. And perceived is the key word there, because perception is all that the brain needs to ignite the cascade of events that are our stress response. If you remember, some of you may remember, the TV show back in the 70s or 80s, Lost in Space, the robot would say, danger, Will Robinson, danger, if he was getting into trouble. And for us, our brains, the old brain, it's sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain, is always canvassing our environment, and it wants to know, am I safe? Because its most important job is keeping us alive. So it canvasses always, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And if it perceives I might not be, then it begins to elicit the stress response. And the body follows the direction that the brain gives. So when the brain says either caution or danger, our bodies change. And that's the pathophysiology of stress. And we're going to talk about that. Our goal is to keep the body at its status quo so that things can stay on an even keel. When they get out of balance, that's when we see all those things that the Sultana shows us. So it can be anywhere from I'm anxious and worried, and so I got all this stuff running around in my head. What about? To my hands are cold. I may have a headache. My muscles ache. My joints ache. My GI system is upset. I either can't go or I can't not go. My heart races, my blood pressure sky high. All of that can be as a result of the cascading impact of the stress response. So let's look at that. And I think this is always, and I like to use this slide just as a reminder. It's not stress that kills us. And people die of stress every day. It's our reaction to it. And it is the reaction versus the response that can kill us because of all those events that I just said, particularly as relate to the cardiovascular system. Increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, increased respiratory rate, all of those things can cause us problems. So the diagram that you see to the right is from a text that I've used. It's old, but it's still true. And I have a resource page for you at the end, so you can see that if that's of interest to you. Jon Kabat-Zinn, Joan Borysenko, Herbert Benson did the earliest work in stress back in the 70s at Harvard and at Mass General. And I think it's kind of interesting to understand where this body of work has come from. And at the time, for those of you like I who were alive during those years, there really wasn't, we didn't have all the technology, the drugs, the information that we have available to us today. I can remember as a CCU nurse, nursing supervisor came in having a heart attack. We could give her nitroglycerin, oxygen, pain medication, and we didn't take people to the cath lab. We didn't have stents. And so I can remember on the night shift holding her hand and talking to her while she had her heart attack. And so today it is very different. But at that time, not only for cardiovascular disease management, i.e. heart attacks, but also for cancer treatment, there just wasn't a lot. For many people, a cancer diagnosis was a death sentence. And when there was nothing else that could be offered, at Mass General, they started this mindfulness mind-body clinic that was to teach meditation for oncology patients, just mostly as a way to say, I can offer you this. And the physicians really didn't think much would come of it. The cardiologist heard about it, and at that time, we had a few drugs for managing angina and coronary disease, not a whole lot. So they asked, well, could our folks come there? And so they said, sure. And they taught people to meditate and to learn to be mindful. Well, to their surprise, within 6 months, the cardiac patients that came, now these were small numbers, but the cardiac patients that came had a 96% reduction in their angina, their chest pain. So that kind of got people's attention. And so Joan Borysenko, Jon Kabat-Zinn, those are PhD doctorates, and Herbert Benson was a physician. So they began to work on that, and that's where the mindfulness work has sprung from that time. And the diagram that you see is from John Kabat-Zinn's work, Full Catastrophe Living. It's a text on mindfulness. And it's been around for, I don't know, probably 40 years now. But it's still true. And it's a great read with wonderful tools. And I love his demonstration of the difference between responding and reacting. So, said all that to say, what's the difference? What difference does it make? The reaction is what happens when my brain has decided I'm not safe. So it begins to release adrenaline, epinephrine, and norepinephrine from my adrenal glands. Those are the stress hormones. What do? Okay, those are the hormones. Epinephrine is a drug we give in a cardiac arrest because it is a very potent vasoconstrictor. That means that it makes things tighter. Blood vessels tighter. The heart, if it's arrested, more likely to pump because this constriction. So it's a very powerful drug that is within us and is released. All right, so if I've decided danger, danger, what happens to me? Well, if things get tighter, my blood pressure goes up because the pipe that the blood flows through just got smaller. My heart rate goes up because I'm trying to keep up with all this. Probably my respiratory rate goes up. I may have some skip beats because of all this adrenaline that is now on board. If it goes on for an extended period of time, then that becomes chronic stress. And with chronic stress, cortisol, also from the adrenal glands, cortisol is released, and that's one of the chemicals that gives us belly fat, which is bad for us. So these things are real, and they are based on a perceived threat. Nothing needs to have happened other than our brain took off. So it keeps us in the reaction keeps us in a hyper alert state. So you've probably been around people. I've been that person who's always on alert. And if the second there is a sound or there's this, you see them sort of jump and it's like, what was that about? Well, they are hyper alert. My cats are like that because, they're cats. And I'm a response. So that's the reaction. The response is recognizing and learning that I don't have to go there. I can choose to do a different behavior. Now, let's say that my brain's going because I'm about to go into a stressful meeting with someone. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what if I say the wrong thing? Blah, 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 blah. That's all reactionary. The other way I could do it is to respond to that and to remind myself. And this is from the Dalai Lama. He does this before he goes into every meeting, or so he says. He thinks to himself, what can I do to help the person or persons I am about to meet with feel safe? All human beings, that's the most important thing. Am I safe here? So if I can stop myself from my chatter and remind myself, everyone wants to feel safe. How can I help the people I'm going to meet with feel safe? Then it reminds me that I have some control. Reaction is more or less out of control, but response is, hold on, let's look at this. Now, sometimes most of the time, that's the right thing to do. Sometimes it's not. And on the news this morning, a young man who had been at the music festival over the weekend talked about how he knew they needed to just run because there was danger. And he pulled out of a car some young women who were paralyzed. They were just holding the steering wheel. You couldn't go anywhere and they couldn't move. Well, in that instance, everybody needed to move. So he basically pulled him out of the car, it sounded like, and said, run. That's reaction, but that's appropriate. Few are the times that is our day. More often than not, it's some anxiety we have about something or some worry we have about something, and we actually can take the time to respond. Does that make sense? Any comments about that? So we want to practice learning to respond unless it truly is an emergency. And a stress meter is a little tool. You can go online and clip art and find them everywhere. However, you can't copy paste them anymore like you used to be able to do. So a stress meter is just like a half circle or a line, 0 to 10, however you want to think of it. Your stress meter, i.e. green, everything's okay, I'm good. Yellow, caution. I can tell I'm starting to get uptight. Our red is the red zone. And we've all been there. We all know what that is. And it usually isn't pretty. So you can decide for yourself what your meter is. May vary from day to day, may vary within a situation. Usually if my stress level is running 0, 3 to 4, I can be green. 5 to 7, maybe even sometimes 8, I'm still yellow, but I'm starting to have my physical signs show up so that I know I'm getting into territory where I can, my next thing is to go into the red zone. And I either yell at somebody, slam down the phone, walk away angrily, whatever. But whatever it is, it usually requires needing to make amends. So a stress meter is real helpful. And if you do it enough, it kind of becomes part of who you are and you don't really think about it anymore. But it's a very handy tool.
Hey,
So,
Karen,
yeah,
question.
yes.
And it may be a little sidebar, but I feel this. So that's when I consider it the 3 Fs: fight, flight, or freeze kind of mindset when you're in a stressful scenario of any type of thing. Do you have any thoughts? I know that's a topic in within itself, but do you have any thoughts on just how that falls within the stress meter?
Well, fight to me sounds like a 10.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, doesn't mean this is true. You can tell me whether that sits right with you. Fright is probably, that might be yellow. Freeze if it means I'm going to stop to take the time to respond. That sounds like that would be a good thing. Freeze, as occurred on Saturday morning, was lethal. So each of us needs to decide what that means to us. But I've never heard that. I like that. 3 Fs. It's probably easier to remember than a meter. Does that help?
It does. I've had interactions with a couple different individuals who have had either personal interactions with in a scenario where they had to kind of just, their body and their brain just tells them, whichever it is. And sometimes people say, oh, I'm always that kind of freeze person if there's an earthquake or something that just comes out of the blue. And then other people are one of the other two. And sometimes it just depends on the situation. It was just I had a couple different people that brought it up completely unrelated to each other with complete different scenarios. And it seems like this fits within the stress meter as well of how your brain and body react.
Right. And I think what's the most important piece of what you said, Brett, is it will be different for different people in different situations. The earthquake scenario, um, freeze is okay if you're in a safe place. You don't want to run out into the yard in an earthquake usually. So, it will vary. But I think as long as you can determine for yourself in this situation, which do I want to, which serves me best, which is the better response for me. The key is, am I responding or am I reacting? And 9 times out of 10, we need to respond. We don't need to react, except in extreme situations.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I'm not sure that's an interesting way to look at it. So and we're going to talk about sign signals for stress in different categories: physical, behavioral, psychological, blah, blah. I've listed some, but this is also individualized. This is to give you some ideas. And for example, my right shoulder gets tight and will ache. And that means to me yellow. Now, sometimes I have trouble sleeping. That used to never be an issue. Some people grind their teeth. They don't know they grind their teeth if they sleep alone, but their dentist may tell them they grind their teeth. So, and that's usually more chronic stress. Headaches, we even call them sometimes stress headaches. So those are some of the physical signs. Think about what your body is telling you, because our bodies talk to us all the time. We just usually don't listen. Or we take a med so that it thwarts our body's warning sign. I'm not saying I'm not anti-medication. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes if we're having indigestion because of a stressful situation, maybe it's an argument, maybe rather than popping a whatever drug is we take for that, maybe we need to understand that before we pop it, okay, my body's giving me information, and it would be good if I listened to it and didn't cover up my warning sign. Behaviorally, compulsive behaviors are really about trying to control. And if we're feeling out of control and stressed, then we can get into some interesting compulsive behaviors. Retail therapy is one. I'll just go buy something. Others are food. Why am I standing in the refrigerator? It's not because I'm preparing a meal. Even exercise can become a compulsive behavior. Some years ago, I spoke to a group of women who were stockbrokers, high producers, and at a time when there weren't so many women in that arena. And they would talk about exercising 2 and 3 hours a day, in addition to, being up at 4 a.m. for the markets. And that's more or less compulsive behavior. Exercise is a great thing to help manage stress. It's a pillar of well-being, but when it becomes compulsive, i.e. 2 to 3 hours a day, unless I'm training for a marathon or something, unless there's a reason, but if it's how I'm managing my stress, that's interesting. Controlling behaviors so that we can get more things under control. Being mad all the time. I bet some of you know people who it seems like anytime you see them, they're mad. And so that's probably somebody who's got a lot going on. And constantly worrying. 90% of what we worry about never happens at all. It's just wasted energy. Also interferes with our sleep. Anxiety, the hand wringing, what if, that's also a worry. Flip side of this, but also very important, is feeling powerless. I can't do anything about it. That's a really tough spot to be in. And so we want to pick up some tools to use to help us feel more in control, not controlling, but more in control of whatever the situation is in our lives. Psychologically, forgetting things. Remember, we talked about how our brain chemistry changes when we are stressed. So when that occurs, we may not remember things. So we become forgetful. That can feed into having difficulty thinking clearly and also being unable to make a decision. Those two things particularly go together. If I know I'm not thinking real clearly, then I second guess myself and don't have much confidence in the decisions that I do make, which circles back around to worrying and anxiety, and perhaps feeling overwhelmed and powerless. The other thing that's a little bit more subtle, I think tends to occur with chronic stress more, is just being unhappy. And you really don't know why. That's also associated with depression. Chronic stress can certainly lead to depression. And there is a mild form of depression known as dysthymia that is occurs over a period of 2 years or longer. But that's that underlying, I'm just not happy. I don't remember the last time I laughed. So, and chronic stress can do that. So those are some additional signs, signs of stress. And I yeah, so let's pick up some tools to use to help us. Any comments about sign signals, anything, any others that some of you might have that you'd like to share? Raise your hand. If not, we'll move on. Okay.
Nothing so far.
Okay. Thanks, Brett. So let's pick up some tools to use to help us. I think that it is true that often we are at the bottom of our list of people we care for. And it is true that an empty well cannot give you water. So if you have given everything to try to manage this situation, you may not have much left for yourself. So an important tool in managing your stress is to take care of yourself emotionally. Spend time with the people you love. Spend time with the people who make your heart sing, and who care for you. And during a stressful time, it may be that there are friends or acquaintances, colleagues maybe at work, that you spend less time with because they're good people, but they're complaining, criticizing, mad, sucking the life out of you. And so when that's the case, you need to have set some boundaries around how much time you spend with those folks, especially when you yourself are in a stressful situation. This next one was one I found, I was doing some reading, and I never really thought about it in that way. Become the person that you would enjoy spending time with. So think about that. Are you a person whose company you would enjoy if you were seated next to each other on a park bench? Or are you the person who you might get up and walk away from, find an excuse to leave? And so thinking about that and creating not only your life, but yourself in a way that mirrors the wonderful person that you are. Improve your interaction with others. Those all three kind of go together. Exercise regularly. Exercise is a fabulous way to get stress out of you, because that rev that we get when we're stressed, oftentimes you sort of feel it in the middle of your chest, and it's energy. And so taking that energy and putting it into a walk, a swim, a run, a cycling, whatever you can do to move that energy from inside you outside. Because over the long term, if we don't, it will make us sick, or it certainly can. Remember, stress kills people every day, but it isn't the stress, it's their reaction. So we want to build a strong, resilient response. And exercise is one way to do that. Now, when I walk on the beach here pretty much every day, one of the things that I'm thankful for is that I can actually do that. There are a lot of people that can't walk like that. So if you are a person who has limited mobility, what can you do? Chair yoga can be really helpful, because there again, you're still moving your body, and there are YouTube channels that have all kinds of things for limited mobility, but being able to move. Try to get 7 to 8 hours of restful sleep a night. And the old myth, as you get older, you don't need to sleep so much. That's just not true. We all need to sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. Sometimes as we get older, it gets harder, but it doesn't mean it's any less important. We've got all kinds of tools, you know, the phone, the watch. My mother, who I'm fortunate she lives with me, and she has a sleep number bed, and it actually tells you about restful sleep. It's kind of interesting. So try to figure out ways to get more sleep. And if you're only getting 5 hours of sleep now, don't think you're going to sleep 8 hours next week, but start to put a plan in place. Part of that is having quiet time before you go to sleep. So your body, your mind is giving your body the message, we're closing out the day. It's either, maybe it's been a great day, maybe it's been a challenging day, but I'm looking forward to a restful sleep tonight. One practice is to write down 3 things you are grateful for today, and sort of close up the day. So work on that. Try to do it without a sleeping pill. If you need to have a sleeping pill, obviously talk to your doctor about that, and you all will make the best decision for yourself in your situation. But setting the tone is ideal. Turning off the television is also helpful. There is an app. There's tons of apps. Calm is great. One that I used to use in this class called Relaxing Melodies has now become Better Sleep. And it has tons, and most of them are free. And it also includes all these different kinds of noise now. Green noise is supposed to help you go to sleep in 6 minutes, and there's brown noise. Anyway, you get the idea. So work toward restful sleep. Another tool is to develop your spirituality, whatever that means to you. It isn't religion. Spirituality is about a belief in and connection with something larger than ourselves. Some people, that is church, or it's God, or Buddha, or Allah. For some people, it's nature. And being in nature is very spiritual to them. So think about what that means to you and then develop that side of yourself. I also would invite you to consider a mindfulness activity or more than one. I find mindfulness meditation to be extremely powerful. When I fall away, I find that I always come back because it makes such a difference. There are, you can walk a labyrinth. That can be a walking meditation. You can walk on your street in a walking meditation, paying attention to each step as you put down your heel and roll forward to your toe. The idea with mindfulness is to focus your attention on right now. Right now. It is the Kabat-Zinn defines it as the intention to pay attention. Sometimes I can sit on my front porch and in my meditation, maybe I'm not just still, but I focus on a single bird song because I have a lot of birds around me. Paying attention, the sound of a fan, but it helps to blot out all the other stuff that our minds want to do if they are getting bored. So they keep us paying attention there. So consider a mindfulness activity. Tai Chi is mindfulness exercise. There are a gazillion of them. There's websites, all kinds of things that are available for mindfulness, but it really is helpful for stress management. And so I'd like to go over, I've got some resources for you, and Brett will post them when he posts this online. I added a couple of new articles. Schumann is the new article based on environmental stress. Saran is about wildfires and smoky air, and also is working with Health and Human Services to reduce the risks of climate-related hazards and how that can impact us with stress. All these others have been around for a while. Let's see. Kabat-Zinn, I mentioned that. He's one of my go-to people. He has other texts and books and things that are available. And he's just he's a real sound person that's been in the field for at least 40 years, if not longer. So I commend those to you. There's different things there. There's things on nutrition, stress management, happiness. And so I hopefully you can find something there. And if other discussions that I've had, there are resources listed on that if they're still on the website, and they are different resources based on the topic. So as we look to conclude our time together and have some time for questions, if you have any, I normally close with a 2-minute meditation to follow your breath. And as I walked on the beach, this beach is down the street from me, over the weekend, this poem, Wild Geese by Mary Oliver, occurred to me. And I thought, well, you know, it really does kind of pull it all together. So I'd like for us to end our time. It's a short poem, but I'd like to share it with you. And if you don't know Mary Oliver, I would commend her to you. Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain moving over the landscapes, over the prairies and the trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. I have thought about this poem and managing stress for a number of years. It's been my experience that often when stress levels seem to get higher and higher, it's very easy to lose our place within ourselves, our families, our communities, and to a great extent within the world. Our place among things is all of that. And so I would invite you to consider picking up a tool to use if you find yourself away from your place. It is my belief that each of us has a purpose, has a talent, a gift that is uniquely ours to bring to this life that we are so fortunate to be able to live. And when we lose our place, we often lose sight of that talent, that gift, and we lose our place. We feel lost. We feel lonely. We feel out of touch, out of control. And so I hope that the time that we've spent together today will allow you to think a little more about your place. Maybe you are comfortable in that place and maybe you feel settled. Then I hope this helps to affirm that for you. But if it feels a little askew because of all the changes going on in our world right now, I would invite you to find some stillness, some quiet, whether it's walking, meditation, prayer, listening to music. It is when we are quiet that soft voice that guides us truly can be heard. When we're racing around, it's a quiet voice. It isn't going to fight to overcome the chatter. We must be still. And for me, in my times, in my quiet times, my meditations, that for me is sacred space when I am allowed to sit with the divine that lives within me and lives within you, within each of us. We just lose our way. So I hope that you may find that space. And I thank you for taking your time to spend time with us today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or hear from you all sharing experiences that you might wish with our remaining few minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. So everyone, if please feel free to unmute yourself if you would so like, and ask a question or a thought or anything that comes to you in mind after this presentation. We're just open ears. Feel free. Give it a couple minutes here. I know we have a thought. Just an excellent comment or excellent presentation and the thought. I know one thing that comes to me, Karen, is that, as I said, I battle with this right now. The epitome of that work life or life work balance is way askew at the moment for me personally. And so trying to find that place where I can use calm or use other stuff and find time to meditate, find time to do any of the many of the things that you talked about to just kind of lower that stress, to be able to get a better night's sleep, to put down that phone for whatever, and quit checking work emails at 8 o'clock at night, and then that throws your brain into a whole different curve. You've been down that road. And that's just diligence, and I just haven't been able to get myself in that. It's just the strangest thing. I used to, and for whatever reason, I haven't been able to embrace it. And so that's a challenge at the moment.
I totally get it. I mean, I started this work because I fell at home and I couldn't work for 6 weeks because I broke my foot, which seemed like the most ridiculous thing in the world. I was a stressed out staff nurse, and I didn't do any of this. So it is challenging. I guess what I would offer is, don't try to do everything. Find one thing. Maybe it's something that really helped you in the past. And when I started to learn to meditate, sit still for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you're out of your mind. I could barely sit still for 2 with the timer on the stove, because this was a long time ago. So allow yourself to be where you are. These are busy, especially when you're still working full-time in responsible positions. That can be a challenge to do. I would just hope that if it's even to start with 2 minutes, 2 minutes can become 3 minutes, can become 5 minutes, and even 2 minutes can bring change. 2 minutes of a breathing exercise. I used to do those on the unit. I'd go to the bathroom, close the door, and just breathe for 2 minutes so I could come back out and think. So I certainly, it sounds simple. It isn't easy, and it is especially not easy in very busy lives. So allow yourself to be where you are would be my counsel, and find one thing. Maybe you just decide to go for a 10-minute walk when you get off work. That can be a beginning.
Great ideas. Absolutely.
So.
All right. Any thoughts from our guests who are still online? Feel free.
Well, thank you, then, Brett.
Yeah. Well, we're at hours, so that's fine, and we're getting close. So, Karen, thank you again. This is really, and plus that visual is very nice. I just wish I was near a beach.
I love it.
That
I
is
gotta
truly
tell you,
the
I love it.
calming. That is the calming thing that I did realize, that when I moved from Los Angeles to the desert, we have sand around us. We just don't have the water, and that does make a huge difference for me personally. So I'm glad that's visual as the conclusion here.
Alrighty then. Thanks,
All right.
everybody. Have a
Thanks.
great day. Nice to
You as
spend.
well.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Karen. Bye.
Bye.